charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people speak to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else. And that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mama has a certain way of coming back into a room that I have often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I've admired you more than any girl I have ever met since I met you.
Yes, I am quite aware of the fact. And I do wish that, in public at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you've always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact has been constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines and has reached the provincial pulpits, I am told. And my ideal has always been to love a man of the name of Earnest. There's something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon told me he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love him.
You really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately.
Darling! Happy you have made me. But you don't need to say you could love me if my name wasn't Honest.
But your name is Earnest.
Yes, I know it is. But supposing something else, do you mean to say you could love me then?
It is a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, there's very little reference to the facts of real life as we know them.
Personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't much care about the name of Earnest. I think the name doesn't suit me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Vibrations? Well, really, Gwendolyn, I must say that there are lots of other much names. Jack, for instance, is a charming name.
Jack.
Jack.
No. No. There's no... Why?
There is very little music in the name Jack.
There's very little music in the name Jack, if any at all. It does not thrill. It produces no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all were, without exception, more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to experience the line.
She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing...
She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Earnest.
Wonder. I must get quiz there once. I mean, we must get married there once. There's no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely, you know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, you are not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. The subject of marriage has not been brought up. It has not even been touched on.
May I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Wood, I feel it only fair to tell you beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn?
Yes, Mr. Wood. What have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you have been about it? I'm afraid you've had very little experience in how to propose.
My own heart. I've never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They're quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.